Leighton Waite was 21 when he took his own life.
Here is a young man loved by his whānau, loved by a partner, loved by siblings, and we've lost that person. I think that we have to recognise that drugs have played a part.
Convicted and jailed for using and selling cannabis when he was a teenager, Leighton's whānau have conflicting views on whether or not the drug should be legalised.
There was times I felt like he loved smoking cannabis more than me. That's the truth. Just as a mother in my heart, I cannot vote yes.
I think a no vote just comes down to that idea that we need to keep a punitive approach. My brother was arrested and convicted for 11 grams, and that ruined his life.
Leighton Waite's school reports and certificates are a few mementos his whānau have left of their carefree and bubbly kid to remember his childhood growing up in Blenheim. His little sister, Michaela Waite-Harvey, adored her big brother.
He was always really protective and fun. He would always be the one that was sort of entertaining the little kids.
But in his teens, Leighton started getting into trouble.
I remember Leighton being taken to the station because he wasn't wearing a helmet while he was riding a bike, and just little things like that that introduced him to police. And, you know, being known to police for little things that happen over time can be damaging.
And it wasn't just minor run-ins. Leighton was dabbling in cannabis as well. And to pay for his drug habit, he started to commit more serious crimes, like burglaries. Then, at just 16, Leighton was sentenced to a year in a youth facility.
He actually had a good experience whilst he was in the youth centre because they looked to try and ensure that they would come out of that centre and not come back. I remember he particularly really enjoyed the tikanga courses that they did.
But soon after he left the youth facility, he was arrested for possessing 11 grams of cannabis. And this time, he would go to an adult prison.
That was when everything went really, really wrong. That was when he had to go onto medication because he was depressed. He was exposed to a lot of violence in that area and exposed to a lot older people who had been in prison multiple times, people who were in gangs.
Leighton's life was about to change on a personal level as well. His girlfriend, Alicia Wilson, had some life-changing news.
I found out that I was pregnant after he had already gone back to prison. He was absolutely overjoyed. He told me he'd always wanted to be a dad, which is something I didn't know.
What was that like for him, being in prison while you were having his first child?
It was horrible for him. He felt guilty. Yeah, he really struggled with that. He struggled that he missed not only the birth, but the first couple of months.
While he was in jail, Leighton was diagnosed with depression. But after he was released, his mental health got even worse.
He was clinically depressed when he was in there, and he was put on medication. And he was getting treatment there, but after he left, he was sort of just chucked out and not really referred on or given any more support coming out.
I watched him fall into a cycle of depression, of battling suicidal thoughts, self-doubt, extreme paranoia.
Even though he was clearly struggling, he did his best, desperate to make up for the lost time he'd missed out on with his young whānau.
He was an amazing dad. He was hands-on, you know, nappies, baths, bottles, anything and everything, he would do it.
The couple had their daughter, Aniyah, soon after, and this time Leighton wanted to give his best shot at a fresh start.
In his heart, he really wanted to change. He wanted a different life. He wanted an honest life, and he really wanted to work.
Leighton did get a job working in a mussel farm, but he was still using cannabis, something Alicia did not want in her life.
I had come from a highly dysfunctional background, and I didn't want to raise my kids in the same cycle I was raised in. And I put it to Leighton that he either joined me in breaking the cycle, or unfortunately, I couldn't continue on in the relationship with him. And he chose to jump on board. He wanted to support me, and he wanted to do that too. So he decided to get clean.
Leighton kept his promise to stay off drugs, but things were far from okay.
The effects of that meant because he had never ever dealt with his feelings or learnt to feel, he always used cannabis as a way to mask whatever he was going through. He found it really, really hard to get clean, and he couldn't handle his emotions going through that process.
Leighton told Alicia he was having suicidal thoughts.
I stayed up with him all night and talked him out of committing suicide because that's what he said he wanted to do. So that was, about 3 or 4 days before. I thought it had helped him. I thought that conversation had helped. I thought I'd built him up enough.
But she hadn't got through to him. In 2014, Leighton sent one final text to Alicia saying, "Tell my babies I love them and Dad is sorry."
He thought that because of what he had put me and the kids through, that we would be better off without him. He thought he was a bad dad, a bad partner. He thought I deserved better and the kids deserved better. He thought that his whole family would be better off.
The one thing that I'll never forget was my mum's scream. Because we got a call when it happened. And I just remember her scream and her crying. And she didn't even tell us what happened, but in my heart I knew.
Coming up, how Leighton Waite's tragic death has influenced those closest to him on how they'll vote in the referendum.
I genuinely just believe that a no vote is misinformed.
How important do you think this referendum is for Aotearoa?
I think it's tremendously important. It's my way to be able to have a say. You know, your vote's your hope, and this is me hopefully setting up my children for a better future.
The dilemma facing whānau on whether or not to legalise cannabis.
It's a difficult one. I really understand that polarising element. One of the big things for me is to really focus on the social harm.
Although we have some of the highest rates of smoking it, cannabis has been a prohibited substance for almost a century in Aotearoa. Voting for or against legalisation is a hotly debated topic.
Do we honestly say, hand on heart, that this system that we've got at the moment does the best for the communities, the best for the nation?
Professor Tracey McIntosh worked on an expert panel tasked with providing the public evidence-based facts on the likely outcomes of what a no or yes vote would mean.
At the moment, we have drugs that can do harm and we have a system that can do harm. How do we mitigate both of those things? How do we move forward so we have a far healthier, more flourishing, more engaged response?
Leighton Waite's imprisonment for cannabis when he was just 18, she says, is an example of how the system failed him and his whānau.
The fact that Leighton did go into a prison environment means that his associations were going to change. Being cut off from your education, the ability to get employment in other places, again starts to limit your opportunities. We had a punitive response for Leighton, but where was our health response to Leighton? Where was our understanding of Leighton?
Those questions haunt Leighton's little sister, Michaela Waite-Harvey, 6 years on.
It is something that I don't think my family will ever recover from or come to terms with.
Leighton's death has driven Michaela to study law. She's now in her 4th year at Otago University.
I feel a big burden in a way to make change where my brother couldn't, to sort of not only give meaning to his life but also his death, and I think it just helps me cope with what happened to him because it makes me feel like it's not going to happen to someone else in the future.
Our approach to drugs, including cannabis...
She's a staunch advocate for legalising the drug, arguing that it will have better outcomes for Māori.
His first conviction was 11 grams of cannabis that he was caught with, and that conviction saw him in low-skilled jobs, not being able to move up into education, and the prison system bringing him into gang culture.
While cannabis use between Māori and non-Māori are pretty similar, Māori are 4 times more likely to be convicted and arrested of cannabis offences than others. Michaela says her brother is a prime example of how Māori are treated differently when they do have run-ins with the law. Leighton was never offered diversion and went straight into the prison system.
With my background in law, we've looked at diversions a lot, and it's just fact that kids who are Pākehā from upper middle class backgrounds are more likely to get diversion because they can fit that narrative of they've got their whole life to lead. Whereas the criminal justice system, they see a Māori boy from a broken family who dropped out of school. They just have this perspective that you don't have any life to live for. Your life is already ruined. So it is that double standard.
Illustrating just how contentious this debate is, Michaela's views are in direct opposition to Alicia Wilson, Leighton's partner and the mother of his 2 children.
Yeah, these are from Christmas.
Yeah, I remember these ones.
His use, what would be classed as recreational use, it took him away from us. It took him away from parenting. He couldn't even be present with me and the kids. Even if he was physically present, he wasn't there.
Because of this, Alicia is voting no in the upcoming referendum, which would legalise cannabis for those over the age of 20.
I would never want my children to be able to have access to be able to legally smoke cannabis. I believe that it's a gateway drug because that's what I've been exposed to. That's my personal experience, and that's why I believe that.
Do you think cannabis charges affect Māori more unfairly?
I agree. 100% I agree. Yeah. Yeah,
You've
definitely.
seen that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But I've personally experienced what it's like to be around somebody who recreationally uses, and the side effects of that was tremendous in my life.
For some, where they'd seen the damage that drugs had done within their whānau and done in their broader community, they said they want it wiped out. When you push and say, how do you wipe it out? Do you wipe it out in a punitive response? Do we actually think the status quo, given that Leighton came up through that system of the status quo, do we think that will minimise or maximise the harms that have been done?
Give me.
Despite their opposing views and planning to vote differently in the upcoming referendum, Michaela and Alicia are bound by the love they have for Leighton and his tamariki.
I love Michaela. I love the bond that she has with both Aniyah and Joseph. They just absolutely love her. She's such a driven young woman, and for my children to have such a great role model to look up to, I'm blessed by that, and so are my children.
And I know that Alicia has a perspective that, she doesn't want her kids to ever be exposed to that. But again, I just think the evidence shows that a yes vote and legalising will actually improve those outcomes because cannabis exists in our society. It's always going to, and it always will. It's how we regulate it.
These are big issues. These are issues that communities should be really involved in. These are issues that whānau are feeling the ramifications of it at the moment, and there should be far more discussion, far more engagement around these issues.